All right, so trees, majestic yet challenging to paint. And what I have in this presentation, and actually, I think it would be best if you muted yourself too. Um, Here, you're muted now, Leslie, you're good. So trees are majestic yet challenging to paint, and they can be painted in all sorts of different ways. So I have grouped together here on this presentation different version of trees that have been painted, and I tried to have, you know, who is the artist and what is the name of the painting, but in some cases I don't have the medium or the size, or I'm missing a part. But anyway, so here we have trees during the winter that are they're painted, but they're basically just a grouping of some strokes, and that's it. And it's all the same color. On the left, the trees are warm against the cool snow. And on the right-hand side, the trees are warm, some sort of a like a almost skin color against the blue sky. But in both cases, you cannot see each individual leaves. They're groupings. Now, if we go here to this one, which is a summer scene by Laurel Danielle, look how the trees, again, are groupings of brushstrokes. And some of them, like over here, are a little lighter. You can hardly see the tree trunk. You can see it a little bit here and a little bit there. But basically, they're just blobs of brushstrokes, and they do read like trees. In this one, in a sunset setting, this is a pastel. So here you can definitely see the shape of, you know, there's this tree here, and there's another one here on the side. There's a smaller one here, and the light comes through, and that's why there's warmth on these in these areas of the trees. And the one that's completely in the front over here has a lot of blue in it, because it's in the shade. But in, you know, in all cases, the trees they're like zones of colors. You could turn it upside down and you would just see domes and stuff. In these examples on the left, that's a pastel, but you can see all of the tree trunks and branches and just a few leaves. And because the light comes from behind the tree, it's it's almost like a profile of the branches and the trees and the leaves. And that's why it's all very dark. It's almost like black. Whereas on the right hand side, this is a watercolor, and you can tell that the trees, they're like just blobs of paint, except for a few little dots here that escapes the large blobs of paints. They're just the blobs of paint, and with the branches, that's it. Each individual leaf was not painted separately. This is another beautiful watercolor, and you can tell how each tree is like a zone. Like this one is a lime green, and then this one is a darker green. And in the back here, to make it appear, go further in the back, then there's a little bit more blue, and the color is more subdued. And this tree here, because the light comes from behind the tree, is almost like a black color, like a very deep, rich purple. And it's just a profile with the branches. This one by Aaron Schur. Um, in this case, you can talk about the tree line, because the trees are so tightly put together and they grow together that there's a line of tree that comes down towards the depth, towards the back of the landscape. And there's one here, one tree that you can see. The light comes from um, the front, so that's why some of the trees are lit. But basically, it's a grouping of rather dark shapes, and then some a little lighter in the front. In this case, a watercolor, The trees that are warm in color, they're just very diffused overall shape here behind these trees in the front, and the trees in the front are just the branches. So you can imagine it's probably like a winter scene. And these winter patterns, it's a small little 6x8 by Kathleen Dunphy. And you know, you can tell where the trees are, but basically, you know, on this tree, you can tell how the shadow is on the left. It's like a mini triangle here on the left. And then this other zone here has a lot more light on it. So it's lighter. And same thing with this tree. You can see a few branches, but there's not a whole lot of detail put in these trees. And yet when we see it, our eyes just know that we're looking at trees. This one here, I love the style of this artiste. Her name is Chula Buragar. And you can immediately tell that the sun comes from the right. And in the left-hand side is where the shadowy area is. But again, you cannot really distinguish specific leaves. It's blobs of paint, so grouping or a mass that represents a zone on either side of the tree. And yet, even though we don't really see specific leaves, we know it's a tree. We just know it's a tree. Now this I kept for last. It's called Age to Perfection. Isn't that a beautiful tree? It's a 500-year-old oak tree in Texas. Now in this case, because the tree is the actual subject matter and it's very close to the viewer, we can see a lot more detail in the branches and in the leaves. But one can imagine that this is probably a very large painting. That's why we can see so many details. So the concepts, and this is a small little painting by Claire Gagnon on the left. But the concepts is consider the whole tree as a mass rather than individual leaves or individual branches. And only a few leaves are sufficient to indicate the leaves. Stay away from painting each leaf separately. I should say each leaf, right? Not each leaf. Okay, I'll correct that. And then the closer trees are usually bigger and have more details than the trees in the distance. So these are the overall concepts. I mean, the number of concepts are endless, but these are the ones that we're going to try to focus on for this session. And so now I'm going to show you the shapes of trees. Depending on the type of tree that we are painting, the shape of the tree will be different. So in this case, I like this image because it shows the branches and it also shows the part of the tree where the leaves are. So you can tell by looking at the branches, why is it that the branch, when they have leaves on them, you can see the individual branches still, because this is how they grow. But knowing how the branches grow and understanding their shape will help you better paint the tree with the leaves on. And in this case, it's good because it gives the overall size of the tree compared to a man. That's cool. So this one is called a flowering dogwood. This one, which is a river birch, plays even bigger. If it grows even bigger, you can tell here by the size of the little man next to it. And you can also see how the branches in this case, they absolutely grow upward. I mean, the sub branches, these ones, they grow sideways. But the one that grows from the tree trunk, they actually grow upward. Excuse me. And the little branches, there are so many of them and they grow so tightly together. that when you look here at the tree with the leaves on, it almost looks like there's just one big branch that grows this way, when in fact the branch goes up and the sub-branch are the ones that grow sideways. So this is the river birch. Now I have a few more examples. These ones are profile, so you can just see the overall shape. This is a white oak. Excuse me. And in this case, you can tell the branches are growing upward, but the important thing is to see how, you know, the overall shape of the trees, it's almost like a dome. And the leaves, they grow all the way to the tip and form a dome, but they also grow close to the tree trunk. And if we look at the same white oak without the leaves, you can tell there's a big tree trunk, but there are also some very thick, big branches that grow sideways and upward first, and then smaller ones that grow sideways. But you can tell the tip of the tree branches, the tip of them, they also form some sort of a dome. That's a white oak. And then this next type of tree is American elm. In this case, the leaves, they grow all the way to the tip. They also form a dome, but they don't grow close to the ground. And there are very few leaves in this area of the tree. So all the leaves are up here. You can still see that the tree branches are growing upward, and there's no branches that actually grow sideways on either side. So the American elm bare may look like this. In the case of the tree with the leaves that we saw, there would certainly not be this branch. But basically, all the branches are up here. So branches go from the tree trunk and they separate and they still go upward. Very few go downward. And the ones that grow sideways, they grow sideways, but up here and not close to the ground. Now the sugar maple is the one, see, this is my thumb. But the sugar maple is one that I really like because we have lots of them in Canada, and we also have a lot of them here and in Vermont. So this tree, if you look at the overall shape of the tree with the leaves, it almost looks like a pear. And you know how I like to paint pears. So this is the tree that we're going to start painting, that we're going to attack. But as you can see, the leaves grow all the way to the tip, and they also grow close to the tree trunk and close to the ground, and they cover the whole area in full. And if we look at the branches, so the bare sugar maple has a main tree trunk in the middle, and all the branches that grow on either side, they're all very small. I mean, there are some that are a little bit bigger, but there's a lot of twigs that grow, and it also represents some sort of a pear shape overall. So that's the one that we're going to tackle first. So I pre-recorded a little demonstration of painting the tree with the leaves. And that's what I'm going to play now. This is just a little 30-minute demonstration. 30-second. And it is a time lapse, so I'm going to paint quick. So I'm using a deep purple, which is a mix of blue and red. And then the sky is just blue and white. And I'm painting, I was looking at the photo that I showed you, and I put all the blue with the sky holes, and then I remixed some of the purple and repainted on top of the initial layer. I put a little grass at the bottom. And so this is one of the exercise that we're going to do. So if you look at the tree, it really looks like the sugar maple tree that we saw in the previous picture. So I'm going to play this one more time. So you can pre-mix your purple before you start. You can use some medium if you want. In the case of this example, I didn't use any medium. But it certainly is painting with a lot of thick paint. So Michelle will be happy. And we don't want to paint with watery paint in this case. And when you paint on wet on wet, you have to paint even thicker than the original color. So I'll give you time to do this. But I have also done a demonstration of painting the tree with the twigs. So to paint the tree with the twigs, the very first step that I did is I painted the overall shape, a pear shape of my tree with the tree trunk with a dark purple. And let this completely dry. And then after that, I went with a nice mix of blue and white, which is a sky color. And I did this. I went completely over my tree, and then using a very sharp tool, I scratched out all the branches. And then using my brush with some additional purple, I went back onto the tree and I added some of the branches a little thicker. So I have a combination of thicker branches and the ones that I scratched out. The great thing with that is that my tree is the exact shape that I want it to be. Oops, like so. See how it's the exact shape? Because first I painted it under and then I scratched it out. So to do this, you have to paint really quick, and you have to paint very thick with this blue color on top of the purple so that it remains wet during the whole time that you're painting. I'm going to run this again. So after my purple was completely dry, I put a very thick layer of powder blue and I scratched out the leaves. And then I completed the blue sky. And then using my purple, I went back to add some more of a darker branches. And the blue, the whole time I did that, the powder blue is still wet. So I'm painting wet on wet. And then I add a little ground that's like snow. That's just because it's a snow scene. All right. Oops. This is what I want to do. So.
We mute ourselves?
So you can mute yourself if you want to. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, so you have a 9x12 canvas. This one is a little bit bigger. I'm taking a bigger one just so that you can see. So either it's an acrylic paper, a stretch canvas, or a canvas pad like what I have here. These are all good. And on one side, we're going to practice our twigs. On the other side, we are going to paint the tree with the branches. So the bare tree, which is this one. Okay, we're going to paint this today. And as you saw in my demonstration of painting this tree, we will first paint a pear-shaped dark purple tree, and that is full, and we will let this dry before we actually put the branches on top. Okay, but because doing these twigs, it could be a little challenge, we're going to, on the other side, so this. On the other side, we're going to practice our twigs. And to do this, I'm going to give you a minute. You need a tool that is very sharp. So maybe you have a palette knife that you can use. If you don't have a palette knife, you can go and get a fork or a knife, something that is very pointy that you can scratch out with the tip. You can also use the, like if you have a brush, you can use the tip, the other tip of the brush, not the one with the bristle, but rather the opposite end. You could scratch out with that. Better if I start the recording. So to mix the deep purple, the two colors I'm going to use are ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. So you can mix them with your brush. That's what I like doing. You can mix them with your palette knife, and you can mix a whole bunch if you want prior to starting to paint. So that's what I'll do. I'll just do it with my palette knife actually, but so I'll put some blue here, put a little bit of alizarin crimson. I mix them together, and it needs more blue than alizarin crimson to do a nice deep purple color. So I keep adding blue here. Oh, now I'm getting a very nice deep purple. The color that I come up with, I'll just put it on a little piece of scrap acrylic paper. So I have a very nice deep purple. Don't know if you can see it. Yeah. So that's the color that I want. And I have a good amount of paint here. So I'm going to clean my palette knife. You can also add a little bit of medium to this. Not a lot, but just a little bit, just so that when you paint with it, it will seal it. Just a little, see, I just have a little drop. Now, if you don't have any medium, that will be fine too. So I just put a little drop here. I don't want this to be too liquidy, so I didn't add any water at all. I know someone who's happy about that. All right, so using this color, I use a large brush, and I'm just going to put a whole area of purple, and it doesn't matter what shape you're making this area. So I don't want my brush to be too wet, and I'm using a lot of paint, and I'm just putting it on my canvas, making sure that that I'm covering a large area. As you can see, I'm not trying to make a tree color, a tree shape. And because I want this to dry, so I can have a chance to put another layer before I actually do the scratch out, then I'm going to spread it out like this. And so this way it will dry faster. Then I'll be able to do a second layer. So I just have a big blurb of purple, and I hope that you guys are following along doing this. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do this.
Claire, should we wet the brush in water first?
No,
A
no
dry
need.
brush. All right.
Now that we have put this here, while this is drying, we're going to paint a tree shape on the other side with the same dark purple. So to do this, using the same dry brush, using the same dark purple, I start by putting my tree trunk. like this. And then I do a shape that is like, it's going to be like a pear shape. So we've done the pear before. And you're going to do a purple pear. Basically, that's what we're going to do. Like so. I think my tree trunk is not quite long enough. This is better. And this side. All right. So this is step 2, is to paint a tree like this on this side. It's a full tree. The next step now is to do a second layer of the purple on both sides. Try to stay within the limit of what you have already done as purple on this side, and same thing here. So that's our next step. And once you have painted them, you can go and dry them again, because they have to be completely dry before we move on to the next step.
And again, we have to use a dry brush, right?
Yeah, dry brush. So I took it out of the water. I'm drying it on my paper first.
Oh, okay. I thought it had to be completely dry.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna paint this again.
Okay.
So as I do the second step, the second layer, now it's becoming very deep in color. And I'm trying to paint thick. I don't try to paint thin here. Because I want to have a nice, deep, rich color. Purple. It's a beautiful day today. I went for a walk at lunchtime. It's not cold at all. I'll go for another walk after class. I'm adding more blue to my purple because I realize it's a little bit too magenta. So once I've done the first side, then I do my tree, paint over the purple on my tree, the nice thick color. And it's important again to stay within, or try anyway, to stay within same size, same shape that you had originally done. All right. I'm painting thick. Once I'm done painting all of this again, I'm going to go to my hair dryer and dry this. So that I can demonstrate the next step. Ooh, I almost dropped my brush. Oh, I did actually. Did a boo-boo, but I will correct it. You don't want to have. purple on here or on here. This is where it landed. Okay. Nice deep purple color. You can paint with the side of your brush because there's a lot of paint that accumulates on the side, not just the tip. Now I have all of this that's all painted, and I'm ready to go and dry it with my hair dryer. This went outside the line here, so I'm just cleaning it up with another brush.
If we're done, but need more purple, like if we, do we need more purple after this?
We will need more purple, but not a whole lot.
Okay.
But we will need more. All right, so now I'm gonna go and dry mine with my hair dryer. So this is how it goes. First, you have to cover with a powder blue. Now, in order to be able to scratch out, the powder blue has to still be wet.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it will not work. So when we do our exercise to try this, we're going to do with a section of the purple that we have painted and try it. And then after that, we're going to do another section. All right, so I'm going to do my demonstration now. I suggest you watch the demonstration first.
Okay.
And then after that, you try it. As a first step, we're only going to do one section, and then we'll do the other section as a second try. Now, to do this, you want to have nice powder blue, very light. So a little bit of blue, a lot of white. So you want to have a nice powder blue color. That's very light because this is your sky. And you want to have a high contrast between this purple that you have on there and in the sky color that you're going to put. Oops, little lint. So I'm going to mix quite a bit of it. And you want it to be very thick. You don't have to put medium. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. So I have a good amount here mixed up. And cleaning my palette knife. I'm going to use a clean brush to do this. A large one because we're going to do a large section. In this section, the bottom one, this is where I'm going to do the demonstration. I'm just going to cover it up with my powder blue like this. And I want you to watch first and then do it because you cannot first put your blue, then let it dry. It has to be done in one go. So I use a lot of paint on my brush, as you can see. I cover it with, I cover the purple with the blue. It's got to be completely covered. So that's why it's got to be very, very thick. And so therefore you have to have prepared a lot of this powder blue, which I did not prepare enough of. So I'll just restrict to this section of my paint. And so once this is done, then I use my palette knife, and just imagine you're scratching out branches. So let's say you have the branches going this way. And then between each branch, you have to remove what got accumulated on your palette knife. And then you can do very thin ones. You can do thicker ones like so, but the thicker ones won't work unless you go with really the tip of your palette knife. And then you can imagine doing very thin branches and go all the way to outside of, of the purple area, just to see how it will work when you do this one. So I can go this way. Let's say do one like this. And then I want to show you also, once you've done this, you will want to do some thicker branches. So this is how you do this. And the result will give you something like this. But if you want to do a little bit of a thicker branch, then what you have to do is you have to use a brush. I like to use a flat brush like this and use this that I dip in the purple that I have still left over, and using this to emphasize one or two branches like so. So what happens is I accumulate some of the powder blue color on the tip. So I have to clean that up before I go again to do another branch. And the branches, so I have to clean up my brush every time in between each branch. And so these branches will be slightly different in color. They will, oops, I still have some lighter powder blue. But it will give you a nice variation. So now I'm going to show you a little closer. So what happens when you use the brush is it starts darker, but as you paint through the powder blue that is still wet, it goes lighter towards the end. But it's a wider branch, and it gives an interesting variation of branches. Now I'm going to show you on the example that I had completed what it gave me. So here you can see some of the branches have been scratched, like this, for example. Like this, for example, was scratched, and this was painted on top. So here, see, this one was painted on top, but this one here was scratched, and this one here was scratched. So it gives a nice variation. Some branches are thinner, some have been scratched, some have been painted on, and it gives a nice overall composition. So now this is your chance to try this out.
You start with the.
So
Okay.
now we're going to do the second example, and I'm going to do it in this section. Now in this section, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like if I'm doing a tree trunk in the middle, and then all the branches that come out on either side. Now to do this, I have to first make sure I have enough of the powder blue, which I do. It's a mix of my white and ultramarine blue. So I use this, and I'm going to paint like if I have a tree trunk in the middle. So that's what I do. This is one side of the tree trunk with my thick blue paint, powder blue paint that's covering the tree. And then the other side, so the tree trunk is thicker at the bottom, thinner at the top. So it goes from thick to thin. And all of this should be covered on either side with thick paint before it dries. You we'll start the scratching. So if you're just watching now, that's good. I will give you time after to practice this. So now I have prepared this area for scratching. And once this is all covered like this, I put down this brush. I use my palette knife. If you have different size palette knives, like let's say you have one like this, this could allow you to scratch a little thicker of a branch like this. See? This one will allow you to do a thinner of a branch like this. And if you take the side, like if you scratch on its side, then it will be even thinner. So these are the 3 scratch that I did so far. So this thicker one, I used this, like this. You could use a butter knife if you don't have one of these. This is a palette knife. And then with this, then I scratch this one. And then I put this one sideways to scratch even thinner. When you scratch, you're scratching out the blue paint. You have to put quite a bit of pressure, and it's important to clean your palette knife between each scratch. So I'm going like this. Oops. Cleaning it, and all the branches, they go up, and then on the end, the branches are thinner. And on the tip, there are more branches. And some of the branches are very close together. Some of them crisscross. And then same thing on this side. Now you could also put it upside down if you like to try that, to scratch it out. Once I've done all of the scratches that I want to do on this side, then that's when I'm going to turn it upside down and try and paint some of the, practice painting some of the branches. So I'm putting this like this, and using my flat brush, a small flat brush, and using my purple. So I load up my brush with lots of purple paint, and I go from the tree trunk, and I go like this. So now I get the lighter blue on the tip, so I have to remove it on my paper towel to completely clean up this powder blue. And it gives me something like this. See this? Now to do this, I have to really push on my brush because I'm moving out of the way. I'm moving the powder blue. So now I'll go back with this purple, and I can do a lighter one like this. That's not so long. Now I clean it up. Purple again. And then I can create new branches and go over the branches that already exist. So here I'm creating a new branch. Remove the powder blue every single time. I can just go and do a tip like this. And it gives me all sorts of different branches. Some of them thicker. Some of them I can do thinner, like this. And then some of them go, instead of going from the tree trunk, they go from another branch, like here. Or over here, like this. The more you do it, then the more better you get at it. Now, another thing that you can practice on a piece of your canvas is just going like this, just practicing twigs with your brush. So it's a good idea to practice this. But see, as soon as you get dirty on your brush with the powder blue, it doesn't work anymore. So you can go like this to practice your twigs. Just practicing. Because our next step is going to be doing our tree. And so this is your playground, if you will. You can practice doing them thinner, thicker, darker, or lighter. So I turn it upside down. It looks nice, but it also shows how you can do some practice here. You can do some practice on the bare canvas. The more you practice on these twigs, the better you become. And I can attest to that. I remember the very first time I tried, it was extremely difficult for me, but I have been practicing the twigs a lot now, so I'm a little bit better at it.
Okay.
So one of the questions is, once you have scratched them out, do you also repaint on top of the scratched out branches, every single one? And the answer is no. And if I show a little closer, you can see how, see this has been scratched out, and so is this, and so is this, without being painted on top. But this one here, I painted on
Claire,
top.
can we have
Yes.
everyone mute themselves? Because we're hearing echoes.
Okay,
Oh.
it's Leslie. I muted you. Okay. So here, see how I scratched out these branches here, these ones? But this one here, I painted on top as well. But I didn't paint on top on these ones here. And when you look at the overall result, it makes it interesting because some of them are thicker where I painted on top, and some of them are thinner, like see, this is very thin. This is one that I scratched out. And this one I had scratched out, but I also painted on top. So it gives a nice variation. Some are thin, some are thick, and it's an overall more realistic way of representing all the branches. So your homework will be to paint this tree. And before you start, you have to make sure you have enough purple pre-mixed and enough powder blue pre-mixed. And in my case, I don't have enough powder blue pre-mixed, but I'll just mix it as I paint. So to do the scratching out, the powder blue has got to be still wet. So when you paint the powder blue on top of the purple, it has to be painted very thick in order to completely cover your purple. And as you paint it thick, then it will take longer to dry. You can also use a little bit of medium in this. It will keep it wet for a longer period of time. So like I did in my second example over here, I want to paint in the middle, and I want to paint on either side of my tree trunk. So that's why I do this like this. So this is one side of the tree trunk. I just cover all of this with a lot of thick powder blue paint. This is the paint color of the sky. And if you had a problem and it dried before you were done scratching, then I suggest first you do this, you scratch it out, and then you paint the other side after. So that's what I'll do in this example. So I'm using this palette knife, and I'm going to scratch out all of the branches. Let's put this example here. So all of the branches, they all grow upward. And so I can use this one like I showed you before if I want to do a thicker one. So it will just be a little thicker when I use this one. See, this one's thicker because I used this. So I will scratch out all of my branches. And some are straight, some are crooked, some crisscross with the other ones. And on the tip, that's where there are more branches that are coming out. These ones are sideways. You'll have the photo of the tree that will help. You can follow that. But there's a lot of branches on a maple tree, a lot of them. And so all of this is being scratched out while my paint is still dry. Still wet, my blue paint, but the purple has to be completely dry before I start this, otherwise it won't work. So you can hear that it's scratching out. And now one of the things that I like to do once I'm at this point is turn it upside down and add a few more of the branches with my brush. And so I have my purple here. And putting my brush into the purple. Then some of the branches, I want them to be a little bit more pronounced. And then in between, I always completely remove the powder blue that came on my brush. I'll add one more here. And if it's not dark enough, you can always go back on top. Add a little bit more of the darkness. Like so. And some will be more of a mix of the purple and the powder blue, but it makes it interesting. And that's why we have practiced the twigs. So the branches are coming along. And you don't have to do all of the branches with your brush, just a few. So once you have done one side, now this is still wet because I did a good amount. I did a good amount of paint on there. Now I'm going to mix some more of my powder blue with my palette knife, and I'll just put it on with a palette knife. That's another thing that you can try. If you did not put a thick enough amount and it dried immediately, you can dry and put it in this one, but make sure to save the middle part where you have the tree trunk. It's a little harder to make a straight line when doing this, because here in the middle you want to keep the tree trunk. You want to save the purple for the tree trunk color. So this is becoming a little bit of a mess. I'm going to use my brush instead to finish putting on the powder blue on overall all of this. So all of my trees all covered with paint, and now I'm ready to scratch out some of the branches on the other side. Oops. So that's a wide one, and then I have another wide one, let's say over here like this. So it's working out pretty good for me. Now I'm using my smaller one. to do all of the little branches that are growing. To know in which direction these branches are growing, you'll be able to refer back to the photo of the tree, the bare tree that I will send you. At the top, there's got to be some. Actually, you know what? This has got to be a little thinner at the top. There. So I can add more. All right, so now I'm ready to add a little bit of purple branches. So you can add them upside up too. You can create new branches. It doesn't have to be exactly where you had the previous branches before. But very important, clean your brush every single time. Every single time, every single branch that you've put in. I'm going to put one like this. Nice, I like that. And this one will go like this. So just enough to make it look like it's balanced out. And once you have put most of the branches that you wanted to put, then you can go back with the powder blue brush and finish painting your sky. So don't go over the branches, just go over your sky portion all the way to down here. Oh, I went over a branch. Okay. And down here. So when you go over your tree trunk a little bit, you can use a clean brush and just clean it up like this by removing a little bit of the sky color. So by adding your sky, all the way around, that's how you finalize the painting. And if your blue is not exactly the same blue, don't worry about that. And down here, you can put a little bit of snow down for the, so by using a little bit of the pink, the red. So red, a lot of white running out, but you can do a little snowbank like this, just to finalize the bottom part. I ran out of white, not good. And then with white, I can do a snowbank like so. Like this tree is growing in the snowbank. because it's bare. It's got bare branches, so that's why it's doing this. So now we have our full tree. Ta-da! Any questions?